The Quantum Entanglement of Michael Hartley. Chapter 1. The Collision. Michael Hartley had always believed that destiny was just probability with better PR. That was until he walked into advanced quantum mechanics on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning and discovered that the universe had a wicked sense of humor. He was late, courtesy of a spilled energy drink, a missing shoe, and his roommate Trevor's inability to understand that borrowing someone's laptop charger without asking was technically theft. By the time Michael burst through the lecture hall doors, drenched and disheveled, the class had already started. "Ah," said a voice that somehow managed to sound both amused and authoritative. "Schrodinger's student. You're both late and on time until I observe you." The class laughed. Michael, still catching his breath, looked up at the source of the voice and felt his neurons misfire in a way that definitely violated several laws of physics. Professor Emma Chen stood at the front of the lecture hall in a burgundy blazer, dark jeans, and Converse sneakers, the academic equivalent of being fluent in both Shakespeare and memes. She was younger than he'd expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses, and her hair pulled back in a ponytail that suggested she meant business but hadn't completely abandoned the concept of fun. "Take a seat, Schrodinger's student," she said, gesturing to an empty chair in the front row, "and next time try to collapse into the on-time state." Michael stumbled to the seat, hyper-aware that 200 eyes were tracking his movement. He dropped his bag, sat down, and immediately knocked over the water bottle of the student next to him. "Smooth," whispered the girl, as water cascaded toward her laptop. She was short with purple streaks in her hair and moved with the reflexive speed of someone who had siblings. Her name, he'd later learn, was Alex, and she would become both his salvation and his tormentor in equal measure. Sorry, Michael muttered, trying to help mop up the water with his already damp sleeve. "As I was saying," Professor Chen continued, unfazed, "quantum entanglement is perhaps the universe's most romantic phenomenon. Two particles, once connected, remain instantaneously linked regardless of the distance between them. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. I call it the universe's refusal to let go." Michael stopped mopping. He looked up. Professor Chen was writing equations on the whiteboard with the kind of fluid confidence that suggested she thought in mathematical notation. He'd taken this class because he needed it for his physics major, but now he found himself wondering if the universe had been conspiring to get him here all along. Which was ridiculous. He didn't believe in fate. Probably. Chapter 2. Observation Effects. "You're staring again," Alex said, throwing a French fry at Michael's head. They were sitting in the student union, 3 days post-collision, and Michael was supposed to be working on his problem set. Instead, his notebook contained exactly one equation and 17 different ways he'd written Professor Chen in increasingly elaborate fonts. "I'm not staring, I'm contemplating." "Contemplating the way Professor Chen writes the symbol for Planck's constant? Because you've been contemplating it for 20 minutes. Michael closed his notebook defensively. "I'm just impressed by her teaching style. She makes quantum mechanics accessible without dumbing it down. It's a rare skill." "Uh-huh." Alex leaned back, grinning. "And the fact that she looks like she walked out of Hot Professors Weekly has nothing to do with it?" "There's no such thing as Hot Professors Weekly." "There should be. Professor Chen would be on the cover." Michael threw the fry back at her. "Can we focus on the assignment? I'm completely lost on question 7. The one about wave-particle duality? The one about my will to live. But sure, wave-particle duality works too." Alex slid her notebook across the table. Her handwriting was somehow both illegible and precise, like a doctor who moonlighted as an architect. "Look, the key is to remember that observation affects the system. The act of measuring changes the outcome." Michael studied her notes, but his mind wandered back to the lecture hall. Professor Chen had a way of explaining complex concepts through metaphors that actually made sense. She'd compared superposition to being simultaneously hungry and full until you actually opened the fridge and had to commit to one state. She described the uncertainty principle as the universe's way of maintaining mystery. You could know where something was or how fast it was going, but never both precisely. Like dating, she'd said with a wry smile. You can know someone's current position or where they're heading, but rarely both at the same time. The class had laughed. Michael had written it down word for word. "Earth to Michael," Alex said, waving her hand in front of his face. "You're doing the thing again." "What thing?" "The thing where you get this dopey look and your eyes go all unfocused, like a golden retriever watching its owner leave for work." "I do not look like a golden retriever." "You absolutely do. A golden retriever in a hoodie who's just discovered bones exist." Michael's phone buzzed. A notification from the class forum. Professor Chen had posted office hours. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 4 p.m., or by appointment. "You're going, aren't you?" Alex asked, reading his expression. "I have questions about the material." "Uh-huh. Legitimate academic questions." "Sure. Questions that require one-on-one clarification?" "Michael, buddy, friend, completely not subtle disaster," Alex said, leaning forward. "She's a professor." "You're a student. She's 30, you're 20, and most importantly, she probably has actual adults vying for her attention. You know, people who can rent cars and have 401ks. Age is just a number." That's what people say right before they make terrible decisions. Michael stood up, gathering his things. "I'm going to office hours, for academic purposes." "Of course you are," Alex called after him as he left. "Try not to knock over any furniture this time." Chapter 3. The Uncertainty Principle. Professor Chen's office was smaller than Michael had imagined. Books lined every available surface, not just physics textbooks, but novels, poetry collections, a surprising number of cookbooks, and what appeared to be the entire Discworld series. A poster of Marie Curie with the caption, "Radium? More like radium," hung next to her degrees from MIT and Cambridge. She was at her desk, peering at a laptop screen with the expression of someone debugging code written by their past self at 3 a.m. Michael knocked on the open door. "Come in," she said without looking up. "Fair warning, I'm 2 compiler errors away from taking up interpretive dance as a career instead." "Should I come back?" She looked up, and Michael saw the moment of recognition. "Schrodinger's student. Please sit, and call me Professor Chen. Everyone does. Well, everyone except the department chair, who insists on Dr. Chen, and my mother, who still calls me Emma May, and wonders why I'm not a doctor. Michael sat in the chair across from her desk, carefully placing his notebook on his lap. "I had some questions about the last lecture." "Shoot." "Well, you mentioned wave functions and probability distributions, and I understand the math, but I'm struggling with the conceptual framework." Like, how does observation actually collapse the wave function? What counts as observation? Professor Chen's face lit up, not with the polite interest professors usually showed students, but with genuine enthusiasm. "Ah, the measurement problem, the question that keeps quantum physicists up at night. Well, that and whether parallel universes means there's a version of us somewhere who understood quantum mechanics on the first try." She grabbed a whiteboard marker and started drawing on a small board behind her desk. "Okay, so there are multiple interpretations. Copenhagen says the wave function collapses upon measurement, but measurement is frustratingly vague. Many World says it never collapses. Reality just branches into multiple universes, representing each possible outcome." "So in another universe, I was on time to class?" She laughed, a real laugh, not a professor laugh. "In another universe, you were so early you helped me set up the presentation. In another, you dropped the class entirely. In another, you're the professor and I'm the confused student." "I can't imagine you confused about physics." "Oh, I'm confused all the time. That's the secret they don't tell you in grad school. The more you learn, the more you realize how little anyone actually knows. We're all just pretending until we accidentally discover something real." Michael found himself relaxing. This wasn't the intimidating academic authority figure he'd built up in his head. This was a person who got frustrated with compilers and quoted Discworld and admitted that even experts were winging it. They talked for 45 minutes. About quantum mechanics, yes, but also about Schrödinger's actual cat, which was named Milton, about whether the universe was deterministic or random, about the ethics of naming scientific principles after people who were problematic by modern standards. Professor Chen had opinions, strong ones, but she listened to his counterarguments with genuine consideration. "You're good at this," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "Most students memorize the equations and move on. You actually want to understand the why." "Is that weird?" "That's the point. The equations are just the language. Understanding is the goal." She glanced at her watch. "Oh, wow, I've kept you way past. I have another appointment in 5 minutes, and I need to at least pretend I've organized these papers." Michael stood, reluctant to leave this book-lined sanctuary where physics made sense and conversations flowed like they'd been friends for years. "Thanks, Professor Chen. This really helped." "Anytime." "And Michael?" He paused at the door. "Next time you're late, at least come up with a quantum mechanics excuse. My alarm was in superposition is way better than whatever actually happened." He grinned. "I'll work on my excuses." "Please do. I grade on creativity." Chapter 4. Interference Patterns. "You were in there for 45 minutes, Alex said when Michael met her at the library later. She'd claimed their usual table by the window, surrounded by enough textbooks to build a small fortress. "We were discussing quantum mechanics." "For 45 minutes? It's a complex topic." "Michael." Alex set down her highlighter. "I say this with love. You're about to do something catastrophically stupid, aren't you?" "I'm just going to office hours." "You're falling for your professor." "I'm not." "Okay, fine. Maybe I'm experiencing some mild quantum entanglement." "You can't quantum entangle with a person. That's not how physics works." "Einstein would disagree. Spooky action at a distance, remember?" Alex threw her hands up. "You're impossible. You know that, right? Impossible and ridiculous and headed for disaster. Thank you for your support in this difficult time." "I'm serious, Michael." "Even if, and this is a massive if, she were interested, which she's not because she's a professional with ethics and common sense, there are rules. University rules, power dynamic rules, common sense rules." "I know." "Do you? Because you have that look again, the golden retriever look." "I'm not going to do anything. I'm just enjoying her lectures, and maybe occasionally going to office hours. For academic purposes." "Academic purposes." Alex's tone suggested she believed this about as much as she believed in the Tooth Fairy's fiscal responsibility. But Michael meant it, mostly. He wasn't planning anything. He just wanted to be around someone who made physics feel like poetry, who admitted to confusion while radiating competence, who wore Converse blazers and quoted Terry Pratchett while explaining the fundamental nature of reality. That wasn't a crime. Probably. Chapter 5. Quantum Tunneling. The next few weeks developed a pattern. Michael attended lectures, on time, mostly, went to office hours for increasingly creative questions, and tried very hard not to notice the way Professor Chen's face transformed when she was explaining something she loved, or how she absently tapped her marker against her palm when she was thinking, or the fact that she apparently stress-baked and brought cookies to share during exam review sessions. "These are good," Alex said, biting into a chocolate chip cookie during a study session. Professor Chen had left them in the physics lounge with a note, "For anyone brave enough to take my midterm tomorrow, may Feynman have mercy on your souls." "She mentioned she bakes when she's anxious," Michael said, perhaps too knowledgeably. "And you know this because it came up during office hours." "Academic office hours, obviously." "Where you discuss her stress baking habits?" "Among other things." Alex studied him with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. "You're in so deep, aren't you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're like a submarine. Actually, you're past submarine. You're at Mariana Trench levels of deep." Michael focused on his notes, refusing to acknowledge that she might be right. The midterm was tomorrow. He needed to focus on quantum tunneling, not the fact that Professor Chen had told him she baked when anxious because it was the only time following a recipe exactly actually produces predictable results, unlike literally everything else in my life. He'd laughed. She'd smiled. It meant nothing. Probably. The midterm was brutal. 3 hours of mathematical torture that left Michael's hand cramping and his brain feeling like it had been put through a particle accelerator. When he finally handed in his exam, Professor Chen looked up from her book. How'd it go? I either aced it or failed spectacularly. There's no middle ground. Ah, quantum exam state. The answer exists in superposition until I grade it. Can you grade mine first? The suspense is killing me. Nice try, but I grade alphabetically. Hartley comes, let's see, after about 40 other students. Michael groaned. That's torture. That's fairness. But, she glanced around the empty lecture hall. Between you and me, I suspect you did fine. Your office hours questions have been more complex than anything on this exam. Really? Really? Now go celebrate or commiserate, whatever seems appropriate. Michael lingered. Do you ever celebrate after writing an exam? She looked surprised by the question. I usually stress bake more cookies and watch terrible reality TV to remember that there are people making worse decisions than my students on exams. That's kinda sad. That's academia. But she smiled when she said it. Michael wanted to say something. What? He wasn't sure. Something about how she shouldn't spend Friday nights alone watching bad TV. Something about how he'd love to discuss terrible reality shows with her, or anything else for that matter. Something about how the past few weeks had fundamentally altered his understanding of what he wanted from education, from physics, from life. Instead, he said, "Thanks for the cookies. They were good. Chocolate chip is a classic for a reason. Like Newtonian mechanics. Exactly. Not complete, but reliable in most everyday situations." Michael left before he could say anything actually stupid. Alex was waiting outside. Well? Well, what? Did you tell her you're hopelessly in love with her? I told her the cookies were good. Oh my God, Michael. What? They were. You're the worst romantic lead in the history of romantic leads. You make Mr. Darcy look emotionally articulate. Chapter 6. Superposition. The problem with falling for your professor, Michael discovered, was that it existed in a state of superposition. He was simultaneously hopeful and hopeless, convinced there was something between them, and equally convinced he was delusional. Every smile felt significant and meaningless. Every conversation felt charged and completely professional. It was exhausting. You need to either tell her or get over it, Alex declared during lunch. They were at the campus tie place, surrounded by other students, who all seemed to have simpler, more manageable crushes on people in their own age bracket and power structure. I can't tell her. It would be inappropriate. Then get over it. How? I don't know. Go on a date with someone else. That girl from computational physics keeps looking at you. Sarah? She probably has a name, yes. Michael poked at his pad tie. I don't want to go on a date with Sarah. Why not? She's age-appropriate, academically compatible, and she doesn't have the power to fail you and destroy your academic career. When you put it that way... Michael, buddy, friend, listen to me very carefully. Alex leaned forward. This cannot end well. Best case scenario, you pine away for a semester, graduate, and spend the rest of your life wondering what if. Worst case, you do something stupid, she reports you, and you end up as a cautionary tale in the student handbook. There's another possibility. There's really not. What if, and hear me out, what if she feels something too? Alex stared at him. Based on what evidence? The way she talks to me, the things she tells me, the fact that our office hours meetings keep running long. You mean the way a good teacher talks to an interested student? It feels like more than that. Feelings aren't data, Michael. You're a physics major. You should know that. But Michael couldn't shake the sense that there was something there. The way Professor Chen's expression softened when he walked into office hours. The way she remembered details from previous conversations. That his roommate was a disaster. That he was from Seattle. That he'd chosen physics because he loved how it made the universe understandable.
The way she'd given him her personal email when he'd mentioned he might have questions over spring break. That last one felt significant. Alex disagreed. She probably gives it to all her students. Do you have any of your professor's personal emails? That's not the point. It seems like it might be the point. Alex sighed. Okay, fine. Let's say, purely hypothetically, that Professor Chen is also interested. What then? She still can't date you, not while you're her student. University policy is very clear. The semester ends in 6 weeks. And then what? You roll up like, hey, remember me, your former student? Want to grab coffee? That's not weird at all. It's only weird if we make it weird. Michael, I say this with deep affection. You make everything weird. You made ordering pizza weird last week by asking the delivery guy about his thoughts on the heat death of the universe. He had opinions. Everyone has opinions when you trap them into philosophical discussions about entropy. Chapter 7. The Observer Effect. Spring break came, and the campus emptied out. Michael stayed, partly because flights to Seattle were expensive, partly because his parents were on a cruise anyway, but mostly because Professor Chen had mentioned she'd be around, working on a research paper. He told himself he wasn't hoping to run into her. He was just enjoying the quiet campus, the library that wasn't packed, the coffee shop where he could actually find a seat. He was, in fact, hoping to run into her. He did, on Wednesday afternoon, at the campus bookstore of all places. She was in the fiction section, reading the back cover of a paperback with intense concentration. Professor Chen? She looked up, startled, then smiled. Michael, didn't expect to see anyone here. I thought I had the whole campus to myself. Couldn't afford to go anywhere. Same, well, not the afford part, the social energy part. My family wanted me to visit, but I needed to... She gestured vaguely with the book. Not do that. Research paper? How did you know? You mentioned it, in office hours, 3 weeks ago. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or realization. You remember that? I remember most of what you say. The words hung between them, more significant than Michael had intended. Professor Chen's expression shifted, became harder to read. I'm getting coffee, she said finally. The good kind, from the place off campus. Wanna come? Warning bells should have gone off. This was crossing a line, moving from professor-student to something else. But Michael found himself nodding before his common sense could intervene. Sure, yeah.
That sounds great. The coffee shop was small, tucked into a side street, the kind of place that served single-origin pour-overs and took coffee very seriously. Professor Chen ordered something complicated. Michael got a regular coffee and tried not to feel unsophisticated. They sat by the window. Outside, the town was quiet, caught in that between-semester lull. Can I ask you something? Professor Chen said, wrapping her hands around her mug. Sure. Why physics? I think you asked me this before. I'm asking again, but this time tell me the real answer, not the polite version you give professors. Michael considered. The real answer felt too revealing, too honest, but maybe that was the point. I like that physics is about finding truth, he said slowly. Not relative truth or subjective truth, but actual demonstrable truth. The universe operates on principles that we can discover and understand. There's something comforting about that. Like, people are complicated and messy and unpredictable, but quantum mechanics is just quantum mechanics. Except quantum mechanics is famously unpredictable. Probabilistically predictable, which is better than people. Professor Chen smiled into her coffee. Fair point. Why physics for you? Same reason, but opposite. I like that physics proves the universe is weirder than we think, that particles can be in 2 places at once, that time is relative, that observation changes reality. It's proof that being certain is overrated, that mystery is built into the fundamental structure of existence. So you became a physicist because physics proves we can't know everything? I became a physicist because physics proves we should keep asking questions anyway. Michael felt something shift. This wasn't a professor talking to a student. This was 2 people who saw the world similarly, who found meaning in the same strange corners of the universe.
"Can I ask you something now?" he said. Professor Chen tensed slightly.
Sure. Do you ever regret it? Academia, the PhD, the research, the teaching? She relaxed. That's what you want to ask? Yeah, why? No reason. She sipped her coffee. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I'm 30, and most of my friends have actual lives. Relationships, houses, kids. I have a studio apartment, a dying succulent, and a publication record. But then I get to talk about quantum mechanics with students who actually care, and it feels worth it. What about the other stuff? Relationships? Turns out most people aren't interested in dating someone whose idea of a fun Friday night is debugging Python code and arguing about the interpretation of quantum mechanics. That sounds like a great Friday night. Professor Chen looked at him, really looked at him, and Michael felt the full weight of her attention. Does it? This was the moment to pull back, to laugh it off, to retreat to the safety of student-professor boundaries. Yeah, Michael said, it does. The silence stretched. Professor Chen looked away first. Michael, she said softly, we should probably... I know. There are rules. Good rules. Important rules. I know. You're my student. For 6 more weeks. She met his eyes again. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Michael's heart was doing something that definitely violated conservation of energy. I'm saying I think the universe has a sense of humor, or maybe just quantum entanglement. I'm saying I walk into office hours with questions I've already figured out because I want an excuse to talk to you. I'm saying I remember everything you tell me, not because it's going to be on the exam, but because it's you saying it. Michael, I'm not asking you to do anything. Not now, not while I'm your student. But in 6 weeks, I'm not your student anymore. I'm just someone who thinks you're brilliant and funny and who makes terrible puns about Planck's constant. Someone who would very much like to take you on a date that doesn't violate any university policies. Professor Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. You're 20 years old. You're 30. That's not a scandal. That's a decade. I'm your professor. For 6 more weeks. Michael. She shook her head, but she was smiling. I can't. We shouldn't even be having this conversation. Why not? We're not doing anything wrong. We're just talking about a hypothetical future where we're both consenting adults with no professional relationship. A hypothetical future? Where I ask you on a date and you say yes, and we discover that discussing physics over coffee is even better when it's not complicated by professional ethics. You're very confident about me saying yes in this hypothetical. I'm a scientist. I'm working with observable data. What observable data? The way you're smiling right now. The way you remembered I'm from Seattle. The way our office hours meetings keep running long. The fact that you gave me your personal email. I give all my students my personal email. Do you? She didn't answer. 6 weeks, Michael said, and then I'm going to ask you properly. And you can say no, that's absolutely your right, but I had to tell you, superposition is killing me. I needed to collapse the wave function. Professor Chen laughed, actually laughed. That's the worst romantic line I've ever heard. But did it work? She shook her head. This is crazy. Crazy like quantum mechanics is crazy, or crazy like actually impossible? I don't know yet. That's better than no. They finished their coffee, talked about normal things, the research paper going badly, Michael's spring break plans, non-existent, whether the coffee shop's scone to flavor ratio was mathematically optimal, disputed, but something had fundamentally changed. The conversation had an undercurrent now, a mutual acknowledgement of possibility. When they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Professor Chen touched his arm briefly. 6 weeks, she said, and then we'll see. No promises. No promises, Michael agreed. He watched her walk away, and for the first time since the semester started, the uncertainty didn't feel terrifying. It felt like potential energy, waiting to convert into something kinetic. Chapter 8. Quantum Leap. You did what? Alex's voice could probably be heard from space. I told her, kind of, hypothetically.
There's no such thing as hypothetically telling your professor you're into her. They were in Michael's dorm room. Trevor was out, which was fortunate, because this conversation was already embarrassing enough without an audience. She didn't say no, Michael said. She didn't say yes either. She said we'd see after the semester ends. Alex flopped onto Trevor's bed, staring at the ceiling. I can't believe you actually did it. I was joking when I said you were going to do something catastrophically stupid. I didn't think you'd actually do something catastrophically stupid. Is it stupid if it works? It hasn't worked yet. It's existed in superposition between stupid and brilliant, which is somehow worse. Michael couldn't argue with that. The past 3 days since coffee had been surreal. He'd seen Professor Chen in lecture, and everything was normal, professional, friendly, appropriate. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at him, an acknowledgement of the conversation hanging between them. What happens after 6 weeks? Alex asked. I ask her on a date. And if she says no, then I deal with that. And if she says yes, then I take her on the best date in the history of dates. I'm thinking planetarium, followed by that restaurant that does the molecular gastronomy stuff, and, Michael, stop planning. You're going to jinx it. You can't jinx quantum mechanics. You can jinx everything. That's the entire point of human existence. We're jinx machines. The semester's final 6 weeks were the longest of Michael's life. He focused on classes, on problem sets, on his final project. He went to office hours exactly as often as he had before, didn't want to seem too eager or too distant. Professor Chen was her usual self, brilliant, funny, occasionally flustered by technology, stress-baking cookies for the final exam review session. But sometimes, when the office was empty and the conversation drifted, Michael caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe? Or anticipation? Or terror? Possibly all three. The last day of class arrived with the anticlimactic normalcy of all endings. Professor Chen gave her usual closing speech about how quantum mechanics was a journey, not a destination, and how they should keep questioning reality even when reality stopped making sense. And if you learned nothing else, she concluded, remember that Schrodinger's cat is both alive and dead until you open the box. So maybe don't open some boxes. Just let the cat be in superposition. It's happier that way. The class laughed. Michael caught her eye. She smiled, a real smile, not a professor smile. Finals week was a blur. Michael took his quantum mechanics exam, pretty sure he'd aced it, pretty sure it didn't matter compared to what came next. He turned in his final project, a paper on quantum entanglement, that definitely wasn't a metaphor for anything personal, no matter what Alex claimed. And then, finally, the semester was over. Grades were posted. Michael got an A. He'd expected nothing less, but seeing it confirmed meant something. It meant his performance had earned the grade, not anything else. It meant there was no ethical ambiguity. It meant Professor Chen wasn't his professor anymore. He sent her an email. Not to her school address, to the personal one she'd given him, which now felt significant in a way it hadn't before. Professor Chen, the semester's over. I'm not your student anymore. I still think quantum mechanics is the universe's love language. Coffee? Real coffee, not hypothetical coffee? Michael. He hit send before he could overthink it. Then he waited. And waited. 3 hours later, his phone buzzed. Michael, the semester's over. You're not my student anymore. I still think you're crazy for thinking quantum mechanics is romantic. Coffee sounds good. Thursday at 3? The place off campus? And maybe we can drop the Professor Chen thing. Emma works. Emma. Michael read the message 17 times. Then he called Alex. She said yes. Obviously she said yes. I could have told you she was going to say yes. You literally told me this would end in disaster. I changed my mind. Are you happy now? You violated probability, common sense, and my faith in the universe's basic fairness. Go have your coffee date with your hot ex-professor. What do I wear? Clothes, ideally. Beyond that, I'm not qualified to advise. I've never dated someone who can explain quantum tunneling. Chapter 9. Measurement. Thursday arrived with agonizing slowness. Michael changed outfits 4 times, settling finally on jeans and a button-down that Trevor claimed made him look like a grad student, in a good way, probably. He arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. Emma was already there, sitting at the same table they'd shared 6 weeks ago. She was wearing a green dress and her Converse, and her hair was down, which Michael had never seen before. She looked nervous. That made him feel slightly better about the fact that his heart was trying to escape his chest. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She smiled. "So, this is weird, right? Extremely weird. But good weird? Definitely good weird." They ordered coffee, sat down. And then, in the way of things that have been anticipated too long, conversation flowed naturally. They talked about Michael's plans for next semester, Emma's research project, still going badly, the question of whether parallel universes meant there was a version of them who hadn't met, or had met differently, or were currently doing anything other than sitting in a coffee shop talking about parallel universes. "Can I confess something?" Emma said eventually. "Sure." "I noticed you the first day. When you burst in late and knocked over that water bottle, I thought you were cute in a disaster kind of way." "A disaster kind of way?" "Like a golden retriever, enthusiastic and slightly clumsy and very earnest." Michael laughed. "Same thing." "Smart friend." "So if you noticed me the first day..." "I spent the entire semester pretending I didn't notice you. Do you know how hard that is? You kept coming to office hours with these thoughtful questions, and you actually listened when I answered, and you laughed at my terrible puns." "They were great puns." "They were awful puns, but you laughed anyway." Emma wrapped her hands around her mug. "I told myself it was just nice to have an engaged student, that I was being professional, that I definitely wasn't counting down the weeks until the semester ended." "How many weeks?" "I started counting after the coffee shop conversation." "Same." They stayed until the coffee shop closed, talking through the transition from afternoon to evening. About physics, yes, but also about everything else. Favorite books, embarrassing childhood stories, the ethics of pineapple on pizza, whether time travel would be worth the inevitable paradoxes. "I should probably go," Emma said finally, though she didn't move. "Probably." "This was good. Better than good." "Want to do it again?" "Yeah, I really do." She hesitated. "Is this going to be weird? The age thing? I'm a decade older than you. You're also brilliant and funny, and you stress bake. Those cancel out the age thing." "That's not how math works." "It's how my math works." Emma laughed. "Okay, but seriously, Michael, this is new territory for me. I've never dated a former student. I've definitely never dated someone 10 years younger. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never dated a professor or anyone who can explain quantum field theory, so we're even." "That's really not how even works either." "Are you always going to correct my math?" "Probably. Is that a problem?" "No," Michael said honestly. "I like it." They walked out together. The street was quiet, lit by street lamps and the last of the sunset. Emma's car was parked down the block. Michael's bike was locked up outside the coffee shop. At her car, Emma turned to face him. "So, second date?" "Definitely. What did you have in mind? And please don't say planetarium. I spend enough time thinking about space." "What about that molecular gastronomy place? Or we could just, I don't know, get pizza, watch bad reality TV, stress bake cookies." Emma smiled. "That sounds perfect. Friday?" "Friday." She kissed him then, quick and soft and slightly uncertain, like a hypothesis being tested. When she pulled back, she was blushing. "Was that okay?" "That was, yeah, very okay. Observably okay." "You're such a nerd. You like it. I really do." Epilogue. Entanglement. 2 years later, Michael sat in the audience of a physics department colloquium, watching Emma give a presentation on her research. She was animated, passionate, gesturing wildly as she explained her latest findings. She'd worn the burgundy blazer, the same one from that first lecture, and he still found it unfairly attractive. Alex sat next to him, now a grad student herself. "You're doing the face again." "What face?" "The golden retriever face." "I don't have a golden retriever face." "You absolutely have a golden retriever face. You've had it for 2 years. After the presentation, there was a reception.
Michael brought Emma a cup of coffee, the terrible conference kind, but she drank it anyway. "You were brilliant," he said. "You're biased. Independently verified bias. Multiple observers." She laughed and kissed him, right there in front of the physics department, which had long since stopped being scandalized by Professor Chen dating her former student. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Quantum entanglement." "Of course you are." "No, but seriously, Einstein was wrong. It's not spooky action at a distance. It's the universe's proof that some connections are fundamental. That observation doesn't just change the system, it reveals what was always there." Emma smiled. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." "I told you quantum mechanics is a love language." "You're ridiculous. But you're entangled with me now. No escaping." "Who said I wanted to escape?" They stood there in a room full of physicists drinking bad coffee and arguing about particle spin, and Michael thought about probability and possibility, about the unlikely series of events that had led him to walk late into a lecture hall 2 years ago, about the infinite parallel universes where this hadn't happened, where he dropped the class or she'd never looked twice at the disaster student in the front row. But in this universe, the one they happened to share, the wave function had collapsed in their favor. And really, what were the odds of that? Calculable, probably, but where was the romance in that? The end.